We have 3 board members that are going to be joining us today virtually, and I do know that one of the board members is having some technical difficulty. So Director Edwards will be joining us very soon, but you will see on the screen we have with us Director Gonzalez and Director Lewis with us. And good morning to you, too. So welcome. I'm Linda Simmons, and I'm the TriMet Board President, and I want to welcome you to the TriMet Board of Directors meeting of January 25th, 2023. And for your convenience this morning, the meeting is available in multiple formats. We've gathered here in person at the University of Oregon campus in downtown Portland, where the public is always welcome. But we're also live streaming the meeting on TriMet's YouTube channel for anyone who would like to watch but is unable to be here in person, and I appreciate your flexibility. We're going to begin with a public forum, and the public forum provides an opportunity for the community to share thoughts, concerns, and feedback about TriMet and our services. For those who preferred to join us virtually, we made arrangements ahead of time for you to make comments with us via Zoom. If you're online and waiting, please stay with us, and we will be with you momentarily. We ask everyone who is speaking today to limit your comments to 3 minutes so that we have time for everyone. And I'm going to go ahead and begin with the first person who's here in person, and it's Dan Hagen.
First time here, so to the...
Oh, yes. Yes.
There you go. Okay, you can hear me. Hey, thanks everybody. My first time here, so this is kind of a little overwhelming, but I think I have should I get closer or farther for the feedback? So I have a couple of issues. First of all, I give customer service. When someone's doing something great, I let them know. So I'm not like one of these guys who just complain, send grievances, and just have a negative attitude. One of the issues I've been having is with the supervisors. When I call, well, I should say the social media of TriMet's, especially Twitter. When I send in video of how operators talking to me, how the rudeness, often it's from them shutting the doors on me or an older person or even children who get cut off from the kids. The customer service will not acknowledge it. And in one case, I had them delete it. And so when I call back to follow up with the phone, I have to record the calls, but there was an incident where the supervisor, Jamie, was incredibly rude. It sounded like I was the employee and she was the irate customer. And I put that recording on YouTube, and I forwarded that to their, through TriMet. And of course, I got no response at all, 0. And I've asked them several questions, like, is it all right to talk to the operator when it's safe to? No response. And when I have a supervisor who's in charge, who's setting the tone, training, and culture, it is emblematic of what happens. And so the second issue is to follow up with public records requests. Now, I had a conversation with an agent when I was calling about another tweet about saying I had a problem with an operator. The lady who I talked to was just speaking over me, talking over me, just completely rude and very, very unprofessional, just unprofessional. I asked to get the conversation from the public records, and that process has taken about 4 weeks. Now, I understand there was the holidays over that, but at the end of all of that, they had located the conversation, a 24-minute audio. They didn't, so they located it, but then they wanted $20 for it. And I make zero income, like zero. And as far as I was understanding, can I pass my 3 minutes? Oh, sorry. As far as I was understanding, we all get an opportunity to kind of examine those, regardless if it's embarrassing or not. And I did ask for like a breakdown of like how much it would cost, or like why am I paying the $20 essentially? And again, it was just into the void.
Yeah.
And so I don't get a lot of.
You know, what would be really helpful, Dan, because your 3 minutes is up, is if you could, we have a website called boardtestimony@trimet.org.
Okay.
And if you could send the dates and times and who you talked to that, that would help us to investigate and ensure that you and others always receive the best service possible, customer service possible. And so I think for us, it would be helpful to have times, dates, who you spoke to, and what the essence of your conversation was, and your contact information. And someone from the administrative office will get back to you with some feedback. Okay.
I didn't get the web address.
Oh, okay. It's boardtestimony@trimet.org.
President Simmons, we have our Director of Customer Experience here. I would love for him to chat with the guest.
Okay. Okay. So maybe you can make that contact but do follow up though with things in writing. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Now I'm going to go to some of the individuals who signed up through Zoom virtually. And so the first one is Glenna Hayes. Welcome, Glenna.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Glenna Hayes, and a little bit about my role is I'm actually here to talk about a community at large, not a specific individual or incident. I'm an advocacy and outreach coordinator for Brookridge that provides supports to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And there's been quite a lot of issues with TriMet Lift, and their services to people with disabilities. TriMet Lift mainly is not reliable. It has caused a lot of issues with people accessing community and appointments. Sometimes they're half an hour to an hour early. Sometimes they're an hour late. And sometimes the drivers will just say they no-call, no-show, even though the individuals are out there waiting. One experience I want to highlight is the TriMet Lift that an individual was taking never showed up. And he was actually stranded for 6 hours near Gresham. And luckily there was a church that was accessible for his wheelchair that helped him take shelter until he could arrange other transportation. This individual cannot take the bus because his wheelchair does not fit on the bus. Manual wheelchairs and standardized wheelchairs definitely fit, but the actual buses don't accommodate for maybe longer chairs or chairs with medical equipment attached to it. And sometimes it's just not accessible for individuals to take the regular bus. Another individual was also stranded downtown. I was their support person for that day, and we waited 5 hours. And we literally watched the taxi cabs through TriMet Lift that they contract drive by us and say that we were not there. And I was constantly calling them, saying, no, we're here, we're literally on the corner, but it's raining and cold, so we're under our impals booked to take shelter. And they just kept driving by. And as you know, when an individual no-call, no-shows, it tallies against them. And eventually they're banned from using TriMet Lift services because of this. However, there's no mutual accountability. That lies with the person who is receiving the service, but there is no accountability for the people who are providing that service. The attitude of the drivers, especially the contracted cabs, has been brought up multiple times of being disrespectful, manhandling their chairs or touching their medical equipment or their actual physical equipment without consent. Some bus stops are still very unsafe. They're just a pole in the middle of the side of the road with actually no shelter. And yeah, even the benches that are at some of the shelters are not physically accessible because they have that bar in the middle and they're not meant for people who are bigger bodied. So I just wanted to highlight some of the inaccessibilities. I'm going to write a little bit more out because I definitely have some more lived experiences I wanted to highlight for this community. But thank you for giving me the time today. And I did want to let you all know that Eleanor Bailey, she did sign up for testimony, but she is not able to be here at this time. But we will submit her testimony written. Does it need to go through that email that you mentioned earlier?
Yes, that's a good email address, boardtestimony@trimet.org.
Okay, great. And I just wanted to, after I submit the testimony, my job is around accessibility and advocating for this community, and I'm definitely down to help with whatever can be done to improve your supports and services, and maybe getting some actual people who have disabilities into the structure of the services, how it's developed, how you guys implement things. I think that would be really helpful if we can actually get those people connected to the board and how things are ran too.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Glenna. Appreciate your comments. Ellie, I can't pronounce your last name, so if you would pronounce your last name for me, please.
Yeah, my name is Ellie. I don't know if that's Ellie Gillespie, is that?
Okay.
That's who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome.
I'm sure you've seen me before. I'm a campaign organizer for Oakville Environmental Justice Oregon. I apologize for any background noise. I'm here once again to talk about my concerns about TriMet's fare increase proposal. The reason why I'm attending virtually today is because I'm actually calling in from Washington, D.C. I'm here for the National Transit Justice Advocacy Convening. And yeah, over the past 3 days, I've really been in community and solidarity with transit riders and organizers from over 20 states and 75 organizations around the country. And I'm also, in a city, in a place that has a metro area that is significantly larger than Portland's, and yet has recently made the commitment to have all public transit be completely fareless. This morning, I sat next to a person from Washington State who worked on the campaign to make youth fares, so 18 and under, on public transit completely free for the entire state of Washington. Yesterday, I met with 2 different organizers from Pittsburgh who have successfully got a fareless pilot program implemented for the entire metro area. And I also had the opportunity to meet with Congress representatives and staff members, including with a staff member from Representative Blumenauer's office. And I was able to hear commitments from those representatives to continue pressuring the federal government to allocate more funding for transit operations and to center equitable transit at the forefront of all of our climate, racial, and economic justice efforts as a country. And I really am saying all of this to demonstrate that this country, I think, is finally hearing from those of us who are in the trenches, so communities of color, low-income communities, youth and seniors, those with disabilities, are finally being heard and seen in the lived experiences that we have with using transit, and just hearing our constant struggle with getting to work and home again every day and visiting family and just all of the energy it takes to move around our cities. And it's just really putting into perspective to me that I think it's shameful that while much of this country is hearing this call to Portland, Oregon, a city that has often been a beacon of progress, is choosing to actively regress by considering a fare increase that would undoubtedly decrease ridership and make transit less accessible in this town. So I'm just here today urging the board to seriously consider the message that TriMet wants to send, not only to this community, but to the rest of the country. We have this opportunity to be at the forefront of progress and to demonstrate once and for all that Portland aligns itself with the well-being of everyday taxpayers of this community. And we just need to move away from fare revenue reliance as a core fiscal strategy to just get more creative with figuring out how to unlock more state funding opportunities. So I know I'm out of time, but yeah, just strongly urging this board to take a hard look at what this proposal actually means to this community and ultimately come to the conclusion that it's not in our best interest and vote no on this proposal in May. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ellie. Appreciate your comments. Our last presenter is Pedro. Pedro, I don't know how to pronounce your last name.
President Simmons, Pedro is not logged into the system. So.
Okay, so that concludes our public forum for today then. So now we will go into our business meeting, and we start generally with board reports. And I see that Director Edwards is with us now. Good morning, Director Edwards. I'd like to invite you to provide an update on the latest meeting on the Committee on Accessible Transportation.
Thank you, Chairman Simmons, Chairperson Simmons, excuse me. Yes, the CAT meeting last week, last Wednesday, January 8th, was very lively. It was well attended, not only by committee members, but by staff as well. Eileen Collins and myself gave a report regarding a need for more wheelchair accessible vehicles, non-emergency transportation, and growing capacity with an independent contractor to provide service to supplement Broadway CAT. UZURB is the contractor and has been fully vetted, and I'll put the link in the chat after my report. Fare increase was also discussed with the concern that was on a fast track, and to some it appeared meetings are more informational rather than to receive input from the public. I share the board's need to increase fares given the eggs do not cost the same as they did 10 years ago. Given that, the board's intent was not to harm vulnerable communities. Data and response from the public, either in oral testimony before the board or written testimony, is what is needed to help the board make an informed decision. An update was given regarding the FX2 Division Street. New articulated buses had a factory defect that was discovered by TriMet zone operators, and the buses are being refurbished. It was noted that platforms should be fitted with audio real-time information to facilitate wayfinding. New ticket vending machines will be coming in the next 2 years, and the new machines will allow multiple users to reload tickets and other features were suggested to facilitate use. And just to note that the CAT goal is never to place blame, but only to enhance and normalize the TriMet experience for all riders. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Edwards. Does anyone have any comments or questions for him? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next report, which comes from Director or Vice President Irish Bauman, who has an update on today's Finance and Audit Committee. Director Bauman?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Yes, the Finance and Audit Committee met this morning and had one item on its agenda, which was a presentation about the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan. This is a document that's prepared by the region every 5 years. It's a coordinated planning document listing transportation projects that are anticipated over the next 20 to 25 years. We heard some details about how the document is prepared with Metro in the lead. Right now, the various jurisdictions and agencies within the region are kind of preparing a list of the projects, the transportation projects they anticipate in the next coming decades. What we heard is that TriMet is going to propose some over the next long term, over the next 20 years or so, 3 high-capacity transit projects, some state of good repair projects, zero-emission buses, and improved bus facilities, among other projects. These are projects where some funding stream has been at least tentatively identified. The board will see the proposed plan in May, I believe, and there will be a finalized regional transportation plan in November. So board, just stay tuned. You're going to hear a lot more detail about long-term plans for transportation within the region. That's the report.
I'm looking to see if any of the board members would have any comments or questions. Seeing none, we move on to the next report then that comes from Director Kim. Director Kim, you're going to provide us a report on the Policy Advisory Committee.
Of course. Good morning. At the December 14th MPAC meeting, we had a detailed discussion of the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan that was just discussed, call for projects. So this call for projects kicks off the window of time for cities, counties, and transportation agencies to update existing projects and to add new priority projects to the RTP. And TriMet is undergoing a review of our project priorities and available projected fundings to determine changes to our financially constrained and strategic project list for the RTP update. By establishing a financially constrained list of priority projects, this update sets the stage for us to secure state and federal investments. At this December meeting, Metro also provided an update of the region's climate smart strategy, which is a set of policies, strategies, and near-term actions designed to guide the region to achieve our greenhouse gas reduction goals. The climate smart strategy was adopted in 2014, and it identifies community design and transit as the two most impactful strategies to achieve the greenhouse gas reduction targets for the region. And the climate smart strategy will be updated as part of the RTP, and TriMet will work closely with Metro and partners to provide feedback on how any changes will impact expectations of TriMet. And finally, Metro presented on how the Supportive Housing Services Program is scaling up local efforts to address homelessness through the region coordination and alignment, especially with the new Tri-County Planning Body. MPAC meets again tonight, and we'll discuss Metro's high-capacity transit strategy update and the garbage and recycling system facilities plan. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing none, then our final board report will come from Director Way, who will provide an update on the Transit Equity Advisory Committee.
Hi, good morning, everyone. January updates for TIAC. This included some information about some job openings, and there was a hiring event that happened on January 19th. Our members also received information about the Forward Together service concept, the fare increase proposal, as well as the security incidents that have unfortunately been affecting the system. Community members are encouraged to attend the open houses, and also to invite community members to share their feedback on all of the upcoming changes, either in person or virtually. If you're not able to attend any of those open houses, there's also the board link to submit testimony at any time. The planning staff also walked us through the 2023-2024 service changes and the forecasted implementation timeline. But this also depends on the recovery of the ongoing operator shortage. Staff is looking forward to getting started with this year's annual service plan, and this is the first package of service changes that includes adjustments to 21 lines. Staff will continue to do an extensive outreach on those changes, and feedback will be collected through February 10th, 2023. We also had some staff from Metro come and provide information about the high capacity transit projects framework. Sorry, that's a long name. We just continue to receive ongoing updates on Metro's work with community members, organizations, businesses, and agency partners, and elected officials about the investment priorities. Members were also briefed about the tiering approach and structure. They also received a visual of where projects are already underway, corridors that are going to be planned over the next 5 years, as well as developing and future corridors. And then last but not least, we received information also about the TriMet's regional transportation plan and the project readiness and the assessment and timeline of that. An additional issue that continues to be risen amongst some of our TIAC members is for TriMet to consider adding restrooms to transit centers for commuters. This has been brought up multiple times. It could improve sanitation, having fewer people going on the elevators in areas around the stations that unfortunately has been becoming an issue. So that was a request to potentially look into bathrooms. And then there was also a request to really just do more of a deeper dive of the TriMet's budget and funding to just really further understand, how service is funded and what are all the different funding streams that are being utilized by the agency. And again, I think this goes back to some of the points that were made from members here around the increased proposal and just trying to understand the budget a little bit more in detail. And then TIAC is also rebuilding. This was the first meeting of the year, and attendance was a little bit low, but I know that John, our director, and his team are working hard on new members and recruitment and really getting great new voices around the table. So hopefully within the next couple of months, we'll have higher attendance at our meetings. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Thank you, Director Way. Director Bauman, you had an additional piece of information you wanted to share.
Yeah. Yes, you've heard from me and Director Kim and Director Way about the regional transportation plan, and General Manager Sue corrected me. The board is going to be briefed on the plan in February.
Yes. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we move on to the General Manager's monthly report. General Manager Dessou.
Morning, President Simmons, members of the board, and staff and the public. Thank you all for being here today. This morning, I will be sharing timely information on an update on security, the December ridership report numbers. I would share some great news about our FX 60-foot articulated buses, and also a reminder about Rosa Parks Day, which is just around the corner. First, I want to address two high-profile shocking incidents that we have understandably gained attention over the past month. My thoughts and prayers are with those hurt, both physically and emotionally, during those attacks. We at TriMet strive every single day to provide transit services for our community that is safe and reliable. But we travel through 533 square miles, 3 counties, and what happens on our system is a reflection of what's going on in the communities we serve. Last night, I spoke before the Oregon State Joint Committee on Transportation. I was joined by other leaders of TriMet and leaders of our 3 other Oregon transit agencies as we called out the regional crises of houselessness, mental illness, drug addiction, and crime. These issues are affecting all parts of our communities and TriMet, and our fellow transit agencies are not immune to the challenge they create. It will take elected leaders, business leaders, and the community members working together to help fix these problems. So I've asked Andrew Wilson, our Executive Director of Safety and Security, to provide an update, a security update, on the efforts and how we are seeing some success. Andrew, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I think we were all really shocked and horrified by a couple really well-publicized incidents this last time. So we really did want to give you a full update in terms of those incidents and also go into sort of our strategic actions that we're taking right now and some successes we've been seeing. But before we do that, I want to talk about these incidents in more detail. Next slide, please. So you may recall or have seen the video related to this. Our surveillance cameras captured this at 5:30 p.m. On December 29th. This is a toddler being pushed by an individual onto the track. The toddler was not seriously injured. Their mother and some other folks recovered them from the track. But the assailant in this particular case gave no warning that they were going to be lashing out or doing anything violent. We've since learned that this individual suffers from mental health, doesn't have a known address, and also had been involved in a prior incident in 21 where there were media reports show that they were not charged in that incident, but very similar lashing out event indicating mental illness. So this was a disheartening event for us. I'll say that security personnel were available on the platform. The law enforcement professionals were contacted. You may recall we moved our East Precinct to Gateway a while back. I've done that, I think I updated you on that in October. That resulted in this person being arrested within 1 minute, which was, I think, helpful emotionally for the mother who was there dealing with this situation. And they are still in custody, and we're looking at ways in which we can prevent these types of incidents, but at the same time, this is one of those incidents where there was nothing to indicate this would occur. And so this goes back to this concept, and you'll hear this in the next event too, of we really do need help with our mental health services in this area and a more collaborative approach regionally. I was with Sam down in Salem last night, and it seemed clear from not only our perspective, but from our peers, that we do need that collaborative approach. So if we go to the next one, and this, another very high-profile, horrific incident occurred out at Cleveland. This actually occurred on the 3rd. It was at 2:17 a.m. in the morning, so it was a closed platform. We weren't operating service, but an individual attacked another individual very horrifically. In this particular case, Multnomah County Sheriff's Department and Gresham Police Department responded to the event, and they arrested the suspect on scene. They are still in custody. But I think it's important to remember that in this particular case, this is non-service hours, and it was on a closed platform. We do direct our security services when our folks are at the platforms. We try to make sure that as we spread out our security, that they're available for our riders and when people are in open service. And this is something we're looking at strategically going forward. So, but both very shocking, senseless kind of incidents, and were disheartening for all of us. We do hope in both cases that the victims recover fully, and wish them well in these incidents. I think that this is part of a broader discussion that we need to have as a community in terms of how we can limit this type of activity out there. With that, I'll move forward to some of the security actions we've been taking. You can see a staffing update. I've been providing this throughout this year, but you can kind of see that we're continuing to grow our presence. In Salem last night, this seemed to be a strategy that is something that everybody is doing, really trying to grow presence, and we've had communications with LTD and Chariots along these lines as well. You can see we made some gains in 22. That transit security officer number is actually now 115, even into January, so that was the end of the year number. Our customer safety supervisors have increased and are going to continue to increase to 46, and you can see the customer safety officers moving into that 80 number. It's important to know that on our customer safety supervisors, they are providing code enforcement, and they are actually looking at ways to change behavior and make sure people are following code on the system. So some of the issues that we see with them also need customer safety officers support, which is that second group there, customer safety officers. As we grow that team to support them, that gives us more flexibility in terms of how we approach the system at different hours and those types of things. And of course, we've talked at length about our safety response team as well. So I will, we can go to the next slide, please. The Transit Police Division, we did move one officer up to 19 this year. We were at 18 for the majority of last year. We continue to work at ways in which we can utilize this group get them to a larger number so we can utilize them more efficiently on the system. We do focus in, and you've seen some of these in the press, and there's been some media related to the strategic missions that we're doing using the Transit Police Division. And I want to highlight that because that's a really good way for us to engage with the community and use all the tools that we've built over this last year related to when we go out and do these. We have safety response team there. We have customer safety supervisors there. So it's kind of a joint effort, and we don't have to use the same tool for every event. And I stress that because that's why we have so many different folks, because we don't want law enforcement used on every case. That's not the appropriate tool in every case. And so, but with that, I say that they are absolutely vital to us, and we do need them in the background to address some of the more violent situations that might arise, et cetera. And so we are committed to building that group back up to 65. but we're also very proud of this collaborative approach where we're able to use different tools for different events, that sort of thing. And those are really highlighted in the best ways at these mission events where you have 3 or 4 different types of security personnel out there addressing issues. And those are very good, and I'm very proud of that team. It's important to recognize that when we're talking about law enforcement and transit police, that we are still dependent as an agency on the community law enforcement teams around us as well. So as Portland suffers with getting their group fully staffed, as Gresham does, that affects us as well, because they are often the ones that are going to respond first to some of these events, and that's how we've always been set up. 19 people to staff an entire division like this is very, very difficult, especially when you think about the 8-hour shifts and vacations, et cetera. 65 is the target we want to get to, but even with that, and in the past, we still needed support from the community law enforcement around us. So I just stress that because this is part of that collaborative community effort that we need to engage in and make sure that our law enforcement teams are well trained and healthy around us as well if we're going to do well in this space. So I'll bring that out. And next slide, please. Some of the strategic actions that we're taking right now. You've seen that we are continuing to use a maximized presence to deter inappropriate and criminal activity. We're seeing some success already, which I'll talk about in a moment, with that strategy, and so we're continuing to do that. As our numbers grow, we're looking at new ways where we can be out on the system. Some of these things are related to more coverage at platforms, particularly in high crime problem areas that we've identified. More early morning code enforcement missions, which are something that we are starting now. This is to be able to do some of these efforts, we really needed those staffing numbers to increase because we have so many other things during the daytime ridership to focus on as well. But we're getting to that point with personnel where we can start moving into these areas. And then, of course, more security personnel actually riding buses and trains, and that has already begun as well. You will probably start hearing about this. I've got a lot of favorable feedback to have folks actually, they see them on the platform, then get on the train and ride a couple stops. Those types of things are things that we're moving towards as well as we increase that personnel number. So some exciting things on the future there, I think, in terms of impacting our safety and the perception of safety out on the system. We're going to go into kind of transitioning a little bit into some positive successes that we've seen this year. Again, I think in large part this is as a result of our increased presence on the system. And also I think a lot of this is due to returning ridership as well. But we're seeing calls for police service go down 14%. The top calls for service in 22, you can see there, welfare checks, suspicious circumstances, and unwanted persons. We think this is, again, directly tied to some of the strategies we're employing. 21 was not necessarily a great year, so I don't want to over celebrate. We have a lot of work to do. But I do think we're seeing some incremental changes, which are encouraging. It's very important to note that calls for service are defined as people calling 911 or the emergency line to report an incident that resulted in a police response. And I will say, just slightly half or more than half of the calls last year were for non-emergency, and not surprisingly, with the societal issues in the communities we serve, welfare checks are the top reason people call for a police response on TriMet properties, which again speaks to that kind of some of the larger society and community issues we're dealing with. Next slide, please. One of the key areas that we've really been focused on this year is protecting our employees and reducing physical assault on the system, as well as verbal threats and harassment on the system. Again, we're seeing some good progress there. We have a long way to go. When you think about the fact that we had 170 assaults versus roughly 220 last year, that's a good move, but we still had 170 of physical assaults. So don't think we're not focused in on this. We are trying to move this number down, but it does seem like we're seeing more progress on this number in the latter part of the year, which again fits with that increased presence which occurred in the latter part of last year. So we're continuing to put people out there to sort of be there for our employees and operators and our riders to enforce, behavior or just ensure good behavior on the system. So some of the societal issues that we're facing, and we've alluded to them before, these are really difficult for us because we can control some of the activity on our system, on our platforms, et cetera. But at the root, we have a mental health crisis, a houselessness crisis, and drugs and addiction that are on the street. And I think living in Portland, as we all do, we know this, we see it out on the street, and what, as Sam said earlier, what our communities are facing, we're facing on the system too. And so we're utilizing all the tools that we have available at this point, and we're taking a collaborative approach and really spending time with our partners and peers in terms of how we can work together to solve some of these issues. But this is, a lot of these issues are outside of our purview, and we need help. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Sam.
Andrew, thank you, and really appreciate your testimony last night at our state capitol. So thank you for that. I want to reiterate to the board what Director Wilson stated, and one, the commitment that we remain committed to improve safety and security on our system, and we fully support a coordinated and collaborative approach in dealing with the challenges that we're faced in our community. But critical, we need state and local lawmakers to lead this change. They must begin addressing the root issues as been brought forward. And we need our district attorneys also to hold people accountable. At the same time, we're looking at what we can do within our authority and our control. So with that, I have issued a lifetime ban to the man that's arrested in the attack of the elderly man in Gresham, in case that he's ever released. I think it was horrific what occurred in that situation. And also, I've issued the woman who pushed a toddler at Gateway into our light rail track right-of-way a 5-year exclusion. President Simmons, I'll stop here before I go on and continue my report, just to find out if any board members have any questions for myself or either Director Wilson.
Board members, Director Gonzalez?
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for the opportunity to ask at this moment. How are those bans enforced, and who are they enforced by?
I'm going to go to our General Counsel here, and she'll give that update.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. Well, the very first step is that we have to serve the people that are banned. So after General Manager Dessou issues the exclusions, we serve them, and we were able to serve both of those individuals. They're in jail right now. So it takes effect immediately. And then we have a whole bunch of behind-the-scenes types of tools that we're now using, that we've been putting into place over the last few months, to make sure that the staff out on the system, our safety staff, know who these individuals are and would identify them if in fact they try to use the system again. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Director Way?
Thank you so much, Andrew, for the great overview and presentation. I would be excited to see sort of maybe a follow-up or a part 2 of some of the collaboration that you were mentioning with cities, counties, even the state level of addressing some of the root causes of the problems, and just maybe a follow-up, doesn't have to be immediate, obviously, because this is a complex issue, as you said, and, we need everybody around the table to sort of, make sure people are housed and, that they can get from point A to point B. So that would be, if it's possible, it would be great to just get a follow-up based on those conversations. And also thank you and General Manager Dessou for going to the Joint Transportation committee hearing yesterday, I will definitely be listening on that as well, because I do agree with General Manager Dessou that this is a complex problem, and we need everybody around the table, including folks who actually deliver those services, health and human services in the community. So that a little bit of a request, if that's okay.
No, thank you, Director Roy, and absolutely be happy to do that. And I do think we are meeting regularly. A couple weeks ago, I met with Representative Ricky Ruiz at his office, had a great conversation about ways in which he can support some of our efforts, and just really appreciated that interest from Representative Ruiz. Also met with Representative Nelson, and he's going to be spending some time at the Public Safety Office with me, just kind of getting to know us a little bit better. So we've tried to really build those partnerships with folks that are out there that are interested, and we really appreciate their interest in trying to help us as a community. And so we'll continue to do that. I'm also meeting with folks with the city of Portland in terms of return to work committees that was under formerly Sam Adams' group, in terms of trying to build ridership return and public safety and those types of things. So those are just some of the things that we're doing in the background as a team, trying to sync in with some of our partners and work together. But I'd be happy to come back and have kind of more formal report of some of that collaboration. So great question. Thank you.
Thanks.
Director Bauman?
Yes, thank you for the report. As Andrew knows, I've been recently made aware of conditions on the MAX trains early in the morning before rush hour starts, and the conditions are shocking, with dangerous conditions, dangerous individuals, and non-destinational riders sleeping, and anyway, other conditions on the trains that are clearly uncomfortable for riders. And I imagine that we've lost some early morning riders. It wouldn't surprise me because of these conditions. So you alluded to the plan to do some early morning enforcement on the trains. Can you talk more about that? And will there continue to be also enforcement efforts closer to when rush hour starts?
Yeah, great question, and I appreciate our conversation the other day, and just kind of really trying to get after kind of some of the things that we're doing. As we build those numbers back up, we have really started to transition towards allowing some time out on the system for our groups and teams. And these are kind of like mission work that we have done in the past with transit police, but starting to do some code enforcement in the early morning hours. What we've seen in the early morning hours is that folks that are houseless, usually experiencing houselessness, have come out on and gotten on the system early on. They're trying to get 3 or 4 hours of sleep. They usually get on at the very early morning hours when there aren't a lot of riders, but there are some riders that are dependent upon us during those hours. And what they're seeing at 4:35 in the morning is really rough out there, because you've got people who have probably spent the night pretty rough, rolling into the system to find someplace warm and ride the system. And so what we're doing is providing a kind of a tool in the morning, which is going to include SRT, customer safety supervisors, to ensure that codes are being followed. A lot of times you'll see people sprawled on 3 or 4 seats with a blanket over their head, etc. That kind of activity, you'll see some really unsanitary conditions that arise, and it's really difficult as a rider. I mean, if you're riding in at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you're confronted with some of these things which are unsafe at times, it's very difficult. So we're trying to provide that presence in the early morning hours to limit that behavior and move it off the system. I will say that it's very difficult because there's multiple areas where this activity could be occurring. We do know of 3 particular areas that we're really focused in on, and we're going to be starting these missions in those areas to try to kind of change behavior and make sure people know that they're not going to be able to be allowed to do that on the system per the codes of that TriMet has in place. But it is difficult to do that across the entire system. So while we may be able to impact it at some of the key portal areas where this activity occurs and ride trains subsequently at those early morning hours from those destinations, so we can impact those, we're going to have to do it strategically given the limitations in personnel that we have. It is important to know that this kind of work does need to be done with multiple people. It can't be done by one or two security guards. You've kind of got to have different tools. The things that you're confronted with in those situations are pretty difficult, and we want to make sure that we're approaching it the right way. But we are confident that as we move into this with the additional personnel that the general manager and the COO have given me the ability to bring on, we're confident that we can start to change those behaviors in the morning. It's going to take some time, and there will always be, as we deal with these community events, there will always be situations that are not what we want on the system. And so we'll need to have a response capability all throughout the day and the early morning hours as well. But really this mission-focused work is where we're central on this strategy. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up
Yeah.
on that particular situation. It's not just a matter of moving them off the system, but finding an alternate place for them to be.
Right.
And even though that's not maybe the role of TriMet, it's the only way to really resolve it, because to me, they have to have another place to be. And so I'm hopeful that just not asking them to leave the system, that we're also trying in particular key areas where there's larger populations of people seeking that relief from the elements, that we find some kind of shelter and community organization that is an alternative to our light rail system.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I do want to make you all aware, this is part of when we're talking about this larger group effort of this activity, that's related to that, and that's why it's so important, and honestly, a very good success story, I think, for this agency to have a tool like the SRT, who is synced in with local community outreach and outreach services to be able to make those connections versus just say, get off the train, right. The other thing that happens out there is welfare checks, and that's why we do a lot of first aid training with the SRT. It's important that they have the tools available to be able to address kind of those situations, understand when to call medical personnel. But those things are happening out there where even in just early morning discussions, you have incidents where you realize medical personnel needs to be involved as well, right, to help this person who's not getting off the train, et cetera. So that's really important. And I will say that we also kind of goes towards the strategy in the sense that we're trying to do this in areas where there's social services available and areas for them to go, because we don't want to move people off of a train in the middle of nowhere, I'll say proverbial nowhere, where they have no place to go, because that'll force them to either go out into the community, be unsafe, probably have some issues themselves, and or just wait for us to leave and get back on the train later, right? So we try to move them off in a way that's strategic with services available.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from board members before we return to the general manager's report? Director Baumann?
Let me just add quickly, I'm optimistic that these efforts will have a real impact. The challenge for us then, once conditions are improved, is to inform the public that it's safe to come back to transit, and so that's kind of a longer term challenge for us. But thank you for all that you're doing on these issues.
Well, thank you. So we'll move back to you, General Manager.
Thank you, Andrew, and really appreciate that. I do want to say that one of the comments that we were talking last night and Salem is, how do we work together collaboratively and in a coordinated effort to bring on teams that can assist people that are homeless to be able to have referrals. So if we go and remove them from the train, to refer them to housing or temporary shelter, and also refer them to mental treatment and have the services available. So that comprehensive package that we're going to work on and put together, that's going to all contain everything that's there. And we'll definitely be talking to the board and also to the public as we move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, turning to ridership, TriMet provided about 4 million trips in the month of December. And that put our weekly ridership at about 999,000 trips per week. However, our weekly ridership was up 11.6% over December of 2021, but it remained down at about 43% from pre-pandemic levels. And as a reminder, I would like to let the board know, as we did experience severe weather between December 22nd and I would say all the way up until New Year's. We were dealing with that. But during that period over the Christmas holidays, we temporarily suspended MAX services. And we also reduced our bus services to primary routes due to strong wind, ice and snow, and electrical outlets there. So that really impacted ridership during the month of December. And as a result, we saw our first month since April of 2022 where our weekly trips dipped below 1 million trips per week. Now, let's turn to some great news. One, TriMet's 60-foot articulated buses will be picking riders up on our FX2 Division Street this Sunday. The manufacturer Nova Bus, they've installed a fix to the bolt issue that we were dealing with, which was first identified by TriMet. You recall that led to an industry-wide recall. So with the buses being fixed and a safe to return to service, operators received refresher training and with the articulated buses, and we are now ready to return to service this weekend. So our riders is excited, and we are excited as a staff to get those buses out there. So looking forward to that. And then finally, wanted to say this morning, a reminder that TriMet will honor Rosa Parks with free rides on our buses and trains on her birthday, which is February 4th. We'll be joined by our partners at C-Tran and the Portland Streetcar to celebrate transit's equity and lasting legacy of Rosa Parks. This is our third year of providing free service on our birthday, and most of you were on the board at the time. You'll remember the resolution was passed back in 2021 to make this an annual event. This resolution was spearheaded by Board Director Keith Edwards, called on everyone to acknowledge Ms. Parks' bravery as she stayed seated on a city bus in demonstration for equal treatments of blacks. Her action and arrests ignited the Montgomery bus boycott and energized the civil rights movement. So I would like to ask anyone that's riding on February 4th, take time to remember the pivotal role Rosa Parks played in American history. So President Simmons, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any further questions for the General Manager before we move on with the meeting? Thank you, General Manager Dessou. So we now move to the consent agenda, and items that appear on the consent agenda are generally considered routine and may be approved in one blanket motion. The items today on the consent agenda include the approval of the board meeting minutes from December 14th, 2022, a resolution directing that the reading of all ordinance be by title only, and we also have one resolution, 23-01-01, authorizing a contract modification with Coney Inc. For elevator and lift maintenance and repair services. So before I ask for a motion, I want to see if any of the directors wish to request any of these items removed from the consent agenda and moved into the regular meeting. Hearing none, I will then ask for a motion to approve the items contained in the consent agenda.
So moved, Kim.
I heard two voices, but I heard Director Kim first. So is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Lewis. It's been moved and seconded All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. So now we're going to move into the resolutions, and we have two this morning. The first is Resolution 22-01-02, authorizing contract modifications with Kelly Services, Inc., Lexicon Solutions, and TriMet Technology Group for temporary technical staffing services. Mr. General Manager, your comments, please.
Thanks, President Simmons. Wanted to just make sure on the number, you said 22. Is it 22 or 23? 0102.
Oh, it should be 23.
Okay. President Simmons, members of the board, as the board is aware, the local job market has become extremely competitive over this last few years, and this has affected TriMet across all divisions and departments, including our information technology division. For some time now, IT has used temporary employees to provide technical staff and services for short-term projects and specialized roles like desktop techs, telecom, and network engineers, database administrators, and other technical staff. In September 2020, TriMet issued an RFP for these services and awarded a 5-year contract to Kelly, Lexicon, and TriMet. Although the original RFP stipulated that contracts amounts could be as much as $2 million, each one was initially awarded for $400,000. Since the ongoing award, TriMet has increased the amount of Kelly contract to $600,000 and TriMet contract to $999,000. Through calendar year 2022, these contracts were primarily used for telecom engineering, desktop support, server engineering, and software engineering. TriMet intends to rely on these temporary technical services even more over the remaining 3 years of the contracts. Given the contract reliance on these contracts, as well as our projected technical service needs over the next 3 years, TriMet will need to increase the amounts for each of these contracts. The resolution seeks board approval for an increase in the amounts of the Kelly and Lexicon contracts to $1.5 million each, and an increase in the TriMet contract to $2.5 million. Temporary technical staffing costs are included in the IT division's annual operating budget. Taking a look at workforce diversity for each firm includes in the contract, Kelly's local workforce consists of 45 employees with 13.3% minority and 66.7% female. Kelly plans to self-perform all of the work in the contract. Lexicon is a Portland-based and has 6 local employees. Of those, 16.7% are minority and half are female. Lexicon plans to subcontract out approximately 1/4 of the work. And then TriMet is a state certified by the state of Oregon as a minority-owned business enterprise, MBE. TriMet has 89 employees, of whom 25% are minority and 37% are female. TriMet plans to use subcontractors for about 5% of its work, and I recommend your approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved, Kim.
Thank you, Director Kim. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Baumann. It's been moved and seconded. Does anyone wish to make a comment before we vote? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on then to the next resolution, we go to 23-01-03, which is a contract modification with Connect Point, Inc., to purchase additional digital information displays and related software. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, President Simmons, members of the board. The resolution before you deals with the reader boards and display screens that TriMet has at bus stops, MAG stations, and transit centers, and more. We have identified these screens, sometimes called digital information displays, or DID, as important tools in improving the customer experience on our transit system. They tell you when the next bus or train will arrive, or when there's a problem. They help us connect with our riders across the 533 square mile district. Back in July of 2019, the board authorized a $3 million contract with Connect Point to purchase its proprietary digital information displays and related software so that we could upgrade all throughout the system. Since then, we have began installing e-paper displays at many shelters and equity areas and have began replacing displays that are beyond their useful life and are failing. Because we have no other option, when an older screen fails, we simply pull the screen, leaving our riders with no transit tracker information at those locations. As the pandemic set in, we've seen costs increase significantly due to a number of unanticipated supply chain problems, and certain kinds of DIDs have become unavailable. We have also experienced vandalism with some of our screens, which has also affected the cost of the overall project. We have either repaired them or have pulled the screen entirely. In some cases, we've added protected coverings to them. The modification requests a contract increase of $3 million to purchase hundreds of additional display screens to replace the screens that have been tied up in the supply chain issues, which come at a higher cost, and also to allow us to continue with the system-wide upgrade on our obsolete DIDs and the related software. The cost of the digital displays are budgeted as part of the Public Affairs Division annual capital budget. Connect Point is based out of California and has 16 employees. 19% of the workforce identifies as minority, and 19% identifies as female. Without this contract increase, we will be unable to complete our transition to the new system that was previously approved. It will also mean that we will simply begin pulling screens that failed throughout the system, leaving our riders without arrival information. We will need to go through this procurement process again, which will take months if need be, but your approval of the resolution is recommended.
Thank you, General Manager Dessou. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved. Kim?
Thank you, Director Kim. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. It's been moved and seconded. Does anyone have wish to make any comments? Director Way?
Yes, thank you. I do have a question. I think this upgrade is great and sounds like it's much needed. I am just wondering, with the software upgrade and, getting new monitors up, will there be an opportunity for TriMet, and maybe we have it now, to include different languages to also pop up on the screen for some of the equity considerations that General Manager Dessou was mentioning?
That's a great question, something we can work through with our purveyor. I don't see a reason that we couldn't put a different language on the screen. We haven't explored that yet, but it's a great idea and something that we should look into.
Yeah, that would be great, especially if it's, isn't going to cost us extra to do that.
Absolutely.
Any other comments? Hearing none, seeing none. I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. The motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the resolutions for today, but we do have 2 second readings on ordinances. And So I'll ask General Counsel Shelley Devine to read the ordinance by title only.
Thank you, Board President Simmons. Ordinance number 370 of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, amending Chapter 14 of the TriMet Code to revise the definition of net earnings from self-employment. This is the second reading.
Thank you. Mr. General Manager, following our first reading and the public hearing, is there anything you'd like to add for the record?
President Simmons, nothing further.
Thank you so much. I will now pose the question to the board. Are there any other questions or further discussion regarding Ordinance 370? Hearing none, I'd like to ask General Counsel to hold the roll call vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with our board members who are on the screen there virtually. Director Gonzalez?
Aye.
Director Lewis?
Aye.
Director Edwards?
Aye.
And back down here to the table, Director Kim?
Aye.
Director Bauman?
Aye.
Director Way?
Aye.
And Director Simmons?
Aye.
Ordinance 370 passes unanimously.
Thank you. The ordinance is adopted. Next, we have moved to Ordinance 371, which is also a second reading, and I'll ask General Counsel Shelley Devine to read the ordinance by title.
Thank you again. Ordinance number 371 of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, adopting September 2022 service reductions and revising route designations. This is the second reading.
Thank you. Mr. General Manager, following the first reading and public hearing, is there anything else you wish to add?
President Simmons, thank you. I have no comments.
Okay. And board members, do you have any other questions before we act on this? All right. I'll ask General Counsel Shelley Devine to hold a roll call vote.
Thank you. I'll start again with Director Gonzalez.
Aye.
Director Edwards.
Aye.
Director Lewis.
Aye.
Director Kim.
Aye.
Director Bauman.
Aye.
Director Way.
Aye.
And Director Simmons.
Aye.
Ordinance 371 passes unanimously and is adopted.
Thank you. With no further comments and no further business to come before us, I will adjourn the board meeting. However, there is a briefing this morning, and we will move right into that briefing. But before we do that, just a reminder that our next scheduled board meeting is Wednesday, February 22nd. So, General Manager Dessou, I will turn it over to you for the briefing this morning.
Thank you, President Simmons. I would like to bring Alan Leto, our Senior Director, up for the final presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, President Simmons and members of the board. I come to you to present the draft business plan to you for FY '24 through '28. The business plan, as you know, 5-year plan, a strategic plan that we update each year because conditions keep changing. This is actually the 7th year that TriMet has produced a draft business plan, so we're rolling now here. And my purpose here is just to give you a relatively brief update on the format and the contents of the plan. And this essentially announces also our comment period between now and March 1st, taking comments both from TriMet employees, of course, and also from public, briefing TIAC and CAT, and just making sure that we are responsive to comments or questions or anything else that comes in. As per usual, I will be coming back to the March board meeting with a proposed final business plan for you to review. And with that, I just want to touch on a few of the items within the plan, and it's projected up on the screen as well. So the organization, we've tried to continue to make this a little bit easier to read, even though it is very much in the details and tailored for our internal use to make sure that we have a good compendium of the actions that we're taking. But a few things in here that I wanted to point out. First, on Roman numeral page 4, which is electronic page 5, if you could advance to that. We started including a list of innovations that TriMet has had over the course of the years. And for this year, we've added of course, the opening of our FX2 division, our first bus rapid transit project in the metropolitan area. And as well as the fact that I just learned in putting together the business plan, the signal system, which you know that we have transit signal priority on the FX2 division, is a new generation of signal systems that is tied into the overall network and is much more dynamic and robust because of that. And this is apparently the first time in North America that this kind of system has been put in with bus-only lanes and bus-only signals. So even though we're certainly not the first agency to produce a BRT, we do have a first in this for us as well. Moving forward several pages to electronic page 15, which is page number 7 on the print. The strategic priorities, which we discussed in the fall around ridership, safety, inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, employees and employee experience, community and partnerships, and financial stewardship and capacity. And you will see those reflected in each statement of our key strategic actions throughout the plan. We identify which of these or which mix of these is driving the effort, because we are trying to make sure that everything we do is leading towards one or more of these strategic priorities to help us focus. And then the very next page, one of the things that has happened this year is the creation of an Office of Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access, and the appointment of a Chief Equity Officer, which you have heard about, but reiterating here, which will include Civil Rights Program Manager, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Partner, Language Access Program Manager, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program Manager, as well as other employees looking for those to move forward inclusion, diversity, equity, and access within TriMet and for our community. A few other things to highlight on this page as well are measures and targets. We do have a number of measures that are on target, which is great. We have approximately 23% of measures that are off target. Pretty much without exception, those are off target still, mostly because of impacts from sort of reverberating impacts from COVID-19, from financial impacts of COVID-19, and from the shifting patterns in travel demand that have come with things like the shift to more telework and the reduction of peak demand, which changes our ridership profile. So I don't want to minimize any of those. We're paying attention to all of them, but there are reasons behind many of them that are consistent with what we're seeing with social change and societal change. Then on the very next page, the key strategic actions are the heart of the action of the business plan. You'll see when we get just a little bit farther, there are a series of actions that are tailored to try to move us towards various goals. Out of last year's plan, we have accomplished 26 of those key strategic actions, and happy to be able to report that, and you will see the details on those after the green check marks in each of the sections under each goal as we move forward. I won't call out each one, just to let you know that those are there. And then advancing 2 pages to page 11, or electronic page, I think 19, is the representative measures. There are a lot of measures in the business plan. There are a lot of ways for us to look at our success and to be able to capture our understanding of how we're doing on 12 goals that kind of span the range of what TriMet is trying to accomplish. But these 7 here are some of the core ones around ridership, around safety, around inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, around employee experience, and around financial stewardship and capacity. And it's a bit of a mixed bag. Our ridership is up, as you have heard. We have not recovered to pre-COVID levels, but we are certainly up over previous years. Our on-time performance on bus is above target. Our on-time performance for MAX is somewhat below target. And you can see the other measures on here, but it again is a indicator of some of the things that we are struggling with, such as the operating cost per vehicle hour, and costs in general rising more for everybody in our economy than we had, I think, all hoped. The next page, I would just point out, we completely revamped our our discussion of engagement and outreach. And this just kind of simplifies it, clarifies, and gets to the heart of how we are reaching out and listening and trying to understand what our community is needing from us. And there's I think, a really good discussion of the variety of different ways we do that. And then that really brings us to the heart of the structure of the plan, which is just a couple pages farther on electronic page 24, I think it is. The goals and objectives here color-coded by the group of the customer group, or sorry, the strategic success group. Again, I won't read all of these. These have not substantially changed. These are intended to be multiple year kind of objectives and goals, and they have stayed that. We have, of course, adjusted these as we've gone forward since year 1, but no substantial changes from last year. And then the next area is the broad range of measures. I won't talk about those because I hit some of the highlights. And that brings us then to the heart of the action of the plan, which starts on page 28, which is electronic page, I think, 36, where goal 1, the key strategic actions, begins. And just to talk you through the organization here, the goal is stated up front with the related objectives. The results and progress so far for FY23. This is one of the challenges of having to prepare the plan ahead of the fiscal year. It means we're only halfway through. But we are able to identify some items that we have some key strategic actions from the current FY23 plan that we've accomplished, and you can see those under green checks, or that we are clearly on schedule to be able to accomplish and that there is confidence that we will get there. I haven't included anything that we have a real question about. Just to highlight then a few items on here. The safety and security reimagining process improvements are underway and hiring proceeding, as you heard from Andrew just a little while ago. And we have had good success in hiring of operators, which has been a key stumbling block to us being able to provide as much service as we've planned. We still have a long way to go because every time we hire an operator, there's a chance they might get hired up to a rail operator or a customer safety officer or some other position that we also need. And so this year we're focusing in not only on hiring but also on retention and just trying to make sure that we're having as many operators as available so that we can move forward with the Forward Together proposals. And then you heard already the safety response team, the customer safety supervisor team, hirings and improvements in the number of available staff to be able to provide presence on the system. And that presence on the system is still part of the next section, which is the key strategic actions stated for FY24 and 28 on, I think, 2 pages ahead on page 30, which is, I think, electronic page 38. Where we talk about hiring and training additional employees to provide more set presence on the system, along with a range of other key strategic actions here. And just to pause on this for a moment, each goal, each of the 12 goals, has this section at the top that talks about the strategic priority focus for this specific goal. And then each key strategic action calls out which strategic priority it's focused in on. If it is focused on a specific objective, it will call that out or simply say that it's generally targeting the goal. identify a lead division and then have the key strategic action with which years we're focusing on those. And again, I will not go into detail, it's all here spelled out. I will just say that for each one of these, not in this document, but in our internal tracking document, we have identified one or more staff who is responsible for moving these forward, one or more executives who is accountable for them, and part of my job is checking in with them periodically to make sure that we're making progress on each one of these. Moving forward then to goal 2, which is on page 32 or electronic page 40. This is around community stakeholders and employers and includes things like our efforts on sustainability and reducing emissions. As you know, we have switched to renewable electricity and renewable diesel, and more recently switched to renewable diesel for WES and Lyft vehicles. And now we're able to say that we continue to use these renewable sources and have reduced our operational greenhouse gas emissions by nearly 70%, which is tremendous. And a great interim step while the battery technology and hydrogen and other abilities to operate truly zero emission are still being developed in the industry. Then there are additional actions called for under this goal as well, and continuing with that. Then I would skip forward to goal 4 around deliver safe, efficient, and equitable service on page 36, which is 44 electronically. And here we have also a reiteration of the hiring and retention of operators, but also a recognition in the efforts here that we need to hire and retain service workers and mechanics, because not only do we need somebody to operate those vehicles, we need somebody to maintain them so that we're sure that the equipment is there and available. And we've had some of the same challenges with service workers, and to a lesser extent, but still for mechanics to be able to keep up with that. And then moving ahead to goal 5 on page 40, which is electronic page 48, the recognizing the FX2 division opening, and then in the key strategic actions calling on the on the projects that are underway, such as a better red line max extension, the bus priority projects that are happening in a number of places across the region, and state of good repair projects, which are critical for us to be able to maintain our assets in a state where we can serve our customers as they expect. I'm not going to go through the rest of these, just to identify that there are additional key strategic actions under each goal around the personnel and innovation items that really get to employee and employee experience, and around financial stewardship and capacity, which includes things like the fact that our HOP Fast Pass, which we introduced a few years ago, really is now in operational stage. It's not really a project so much anymore as an operation. We're over 85% of fares coming in via HOP each month now. So we see this as a successful project that we're able to continue to build on. And then the financial goals, including meeting the strategic financial plan targets as well. The rest of this is just a brief statement of the route ahead, and then as with any technical document, a long list of acronyms and definitions to help people understand what's in the document. But with that is the draft business plan. Again, this is hopefully by the end of today, it'll be posted online. I'll be sharing it again with the Committee on Accessible Transportation and the Equity Advisory Committee, and looking for comments from any and all as we look towards a March 1st close date on that comment period, and we'll be able to develop a final from then. With that, I don't have anything else to share on that, and welcome any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I turn to all of my board members. Director Baumann first.
Yes, thank you, Alan. I've been on the business plan train, so to speak, since the beginning. And I have to say that every year I think it gets better organized and easier to read. So,
Great.
so this was a pleasure to dig into. I have a question that you might not be prepared for, and that is, do we have any instances where the business plan has made a difference in TriMet's effectiveness? We know these are, you could say, hey, these are actions we were going to take anyway. These were goals we were going to try to meet anyway. Are there any stories or any anecdotes where the fact that we have this business plan set out has made a difference?
I'm not sure I can bring a story to mind at this moment. I will tell you, we have to go through, obviously, not only a review internally with staff, but also do reviews with the executive team. And it brings issues up in the conversation with the executive team. And I think there's a true value to that where, one sort of, we may have some ideas, but it hasn't been brought to the whole group to kind of thrash through and bring issues up. And not that I can bring any specific into mind, but even this year, having those conversations has kind of brought some ideas up in things that we need to address. I will say specifically around, thinking about the early draft of this one, took a step back thinking about what we need to do about ridership, because that is a multi-year, essentially multi-decade sort of existential challenge for TriMet to make sure that we are constantly moving towards that. And that spurred a whole series of conversations and some work coming forward in looking at how we address ridership. We had a group internally that was addressing ridership needs that was more focused on communications and customer service and looking at those things. We'll be moving forward with a group that still includes that, but also includes operational and maintenance items, and just casting the net more broadly so that we're coordinating across that. I guess I'll also say that just the development of it from the very beginning 7 years ago created a lot of additional conversation at the executive team and between executives and directors and managers in a way that I certainly hope has been helpful, and I've gotten feedback that it's been helpful.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none?
Yes, I had my hand up.
Oh, I didn't see your hand up, Director Edwards. Please.
I had a couple of questions. Thank you for that report, Howard. But I guess on our lost time increase, not right now, but do you have a more comprehensive report on what, if there's been any increase or decrease in our lost time increase, and where most of those injuries occur, and how long our employees are off with those injuries, how much time are they actually losing? Okay. My second question is on the attrition rate. Is that decreasing, given that we've had our bounty out for a while and we've been getting new operators, and of course we have retirees as well. And so I just wanted to get some more information on that also.
Yeah, Director Edwards, thank you for both questions. I don't have it off the top of my head, but we'll bring back some more information on the lost time injuries and the trend. In terms of the attrition rate, my understanding is yes, there has been some reduction in the attrition rate. We continue also to project that month after month to understand how are we doing with hiring, how are we doing with attrition. Attrition means lots of things. Some good, like retirements for people who have served a long time. Some not so great, which means that we're losing them to somebody else entirely. And some great in that they're promoting to other positions. So we're tracking all of those different ones and seeing, I think, a little bit of an improvement in the attrition rate, and obviously hopes for better as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I don't miss anyone else that might want to make a comment. Sorry about missing you, Director Edwards. Oh, Ozzy, are you raising your hand? I need bigger hands.
Thank you. Alan, first of all, thanks a lot for the report. I have to agree with Director Bowman that the business plan is looking easier, cleaner. Now that we are in somewhat of a go mode, a maintenance mode, if you will, it's great to look back on some of the things that have been accomplished. Now, the one thing that I'm just would like to see a gap filled in as we look forward has to do around the financial stability. We've had such conversations recently around the financial status. We've had discussions now about fare box recovery rates, and there's a lot of conversations now in the light of service planning on how this will be reconciled. And I just want to underscore that as we move forward, I'd like to see this business plan begin to incorporate some of the ideas that we're not only already leading with, but perhaps propose some suggestions on ways in which we can really prioritize the financial stability of the organization.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. Yes, and I did skip over, not because it's not important, but because I didn't want to read every single one of these to you. But there are key strategic actions, especially in Goal 12, getting directly to that, including some items that were presented to the board earlier around fare recovery and fare evasion. So I'd be happy to look into this more, and if you have any specific items you want to follow up with, that would be great, but we'll definitely check in with our finance staff as well.
Okay, so I am again checking to make sure there aren't any other questions. Hearing none, thank you so much, Alan. Your presentations are always very good. And like Director Bauman, I feel like my presence on the board has been since the genesis of the business plan, and I can't even imagine the organization without one. So it's not an easy thing to do, and you manage it with such grace and ease. You make it seem simple, but I know it's not. So thank you very much. And to all of you, we will see you in February on the 22nd, and I want to wish you all a good week.
Thank you.